I heard you've been struggling with your dagger brush. Let's talk about it.
Feeling really frustrated watching other artists create these beautiful florals? Well, in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to unlock your full potential of this amazing tool and paint a loose and stunning pink flower that's full of life. I'm going to use 3 of these dagger brushes that I happen to have on hand and see if there really is any difference.
I've heard from a number of you guys that you're having a hard time. You've been watching all of these artists do these beautiful paintings with their dagger brush, and you're just like, I go to do it myself and I just can't get it. So we're going to paint this little loose floral today, and I'm going to be using 3 different dagger brushes. Does that make a difference? Let's try it and find out.
This is my striper, which is by Silver Black Velvet. This is a 1/4 inch. You can see it's very, very soft, very fluffy. It's quite similar, I think, to my 1/4 inch Princeton. Again, it's very, very soft, very fluffy. So it's not super springy. Well, I guess it's a little springy, but it's softer than this particular dagger brush. This one is by Golden. This is a 3/8, and this one is not quite as soft. This is not natural hair, and it does have a little bit more of a spring to it than the other ones, and you can see how sharp and defined it is. But let's take a look at them while they're wet. So you can see these two were very narrow. Again, this is a little bit larger, it's 3/8. These two have, this one has a really sharp point to it. This one has a little bit more definition. But you can see when they get wet, you get a different shape. So we're going to test this out. We're going to do a really quick little flower. First one I'm going to use is the black velvet. The trick to this is just being very loose and having a lot of fun with it. So we're just going to do a little shape. I'm going to wet that a little bit more. I want this more of the consistency of tea. I had it more coffee-like. And you can see I just kind of scribble it around. So this is very, very loose and pretty wet. I don't want it, if I have a lot more pigment on it and I have a dry area that I'm working on, the pigment's gonna stay in place a little easier. So I want this to be super loose. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of orange now, let some of that mingle a little bit. So I did that really fast. Let's slow it down a little bit. You can see I'm holding the brush way here at the back. I've got that nice point. And I'm going to put some pressure down and just smoosh it. You can see I've got that brush is just making a mess down there on the paper. Loading back up with a little bit more paint, a little bit more water. You can see I've got a little bit more movement now because it's more water. I'm going to spread that one out, and again, I'm just smooshing it. I mean, I'm following a somewhat of a shape of a flower, kind of a made-up flower. But you can see it was just a smush and pull. And that is the trick to these dagger brushes. They don't allow you to have a whole lot of control. Maybe even add a little bit of yellow in there, just to brighten things up a little bit. So it's got like a little center. Now that I've got the color in there, I can go in with a little bit deeper pigment. So this is less water now. And I can drop in some of those darker colors just in a few areas, maybe where, this might be a shadow, in the shadow area. Squiggly, loose, fun, like a little petal, adding more water to it because I'm not getting a lot of movement again. I don't know what kind of flower this is. We're making it up. So we have a nice flower shape. Use a little bit of green now. Let's give this a little bit of a stem. And I want, of course, some darker values. I don't want to have all that same bright, bright green. So let's go back in with a darker and let that move around a little bit. That's pretty. Let's slow it back down again. Take a look at that. Smushing, smearing, putting some pressure down on the brush and just moving that paint, creating that front petal in there. And then getting some green, and you'll notice that I have switched now to using more of the point of my dagger. And I don't want as much pressure. You can see if I don't put much pressure, I get more distinct lines just using the very tip of that brush very softly. So that's why I love this brush, because you can do so much with it. You can make it super messy, or you can use that point and make things very defined. So we'll go back in with that little darker green, and again, just using the tip of that, the very, very top of that, and getting some really fine little lines. Look at that. And I'm following that down. So just a feather touch when you're using the tip of that brush. You can even put like a little leaf shape on here. Again, I'm making it up. I don't know what kind of flower this is. So there we have one. This one was really easy to work with. It was super loose. So I'm going to let that dry, and then we can just pop in a few details. Actually, let's just do a little bit of purple in here. Let's just do a couple little dots in the center for some darker values. We're going to maybe add some black to that afterward. Now I'm going to let that dry. And let's do another one. This time I'm going to use, actually I'm going to use this one because this one's a little stiffer, and let's see how we compare. So I'm going to do a smaller one down below. Same idea. Again, I want it fairly watery. I want it the consistency of maybe some nice tea, maybe coffee. And again, I've got my point of the brush, and I'm gonna squiggle it, squiggle a little shape here. We're gonna make this a little smaller. So the key to the dagger brush is just get messy. You can't create like a loose floral if you're trying to control everything. So you just gotta put it down there, squiggle it around, just have fun with it. Add a little orange to that. And I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow. We'll keep it somewhat similar. And then we'll go with some green. I've got another green. Let's do this shade green. This is pretty dark. Again, squiggly, loose, fun. Making the flower up. If I'm trying to copy a flower, it's going to be a lot harder. All right, we'll let that dry. Look at this blooming effect that this is getting in here now. I love that. Isn't that pretty? So let's do one more, this time with this was my favorite. This was my very first dagger brush that I ever got. This is the Princeton one. Let's do maybe a darker color. We'll just do a small one over here. And so they're working pretty much all the same way. I mean, I can't really tell much of a difference. I'm probably not the best person to judge stuff though, because I'll use anything. I'll use my fingers. I just need to get in there. Anything that will throw paint on is all I need. And I've developed that. That wasn't always the case, by the way. So when I say that, don't think that I'm like, oh, how is she so special? Well, it didn't start out that way. Truthfully, I got that way. Ooh, a little green in there. I don't know what that is. Let's just maybe put a little thicker stem there. Okay, that's it. I think that's all we need. I think I'm gonna add a little darker in here. Again, loosey-goosey, having fun with it, not hyper sensitive to every little mark that I make. All right, let's let that dry, and we'll just throw a couple details in there. Okay, so we're back. It has dried, and we're gonna throw in just a couple more details. So I'm gonna go a little darker this time. And when I say a little darker, I mean less water. And I'm just gonna do a couple little other strokes in here, getting some darker values in. I don't wanna go super detailed with this. Just gonna add a little bit of color in there because it did get quite light. So I think that's gonna be it. And then I've got some purple. I think this is grape. It's almost black. And I'm just going to throw a couple little dots in here. So maybe like this has got kind of a little poppy vibe to it, where it's got the little center in there. Again, it doesn't have to have a lot. And maybe a little bit more down in here. I should have a little shadow in there. Mixing my blue and my green together a little bit. And again, I want to have just a few. This is more of a dry brush, like that too. Again, I want to have just a couple more darker values in here.
And if you want to know a little bit more about your Dagger brush before you paint loose florals, you need to watch this one. I'll link it up here for you. And if you're still struggling with florals and you want to learn a little bit more about them, we have a 63 lesson, 9-hour worth of content course that you can try. And I'll leave the link for that down below as well. Don't forget, if you are a patron, you get full access to my YouTube videos, as well as lots of tutorials and free demos over on my Patreon, where you can help support me and my channel over there for just $5 a month. I personally like those the best. So play around with it. If you haven't tried these brushes, give them a try. Keep going with it. Don't give up, because they're super fun. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Bye.